There we go. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today for this forum. And thank you to really Sarah Johnson, who I know has been offering this for several years, and to our panelists who are Rockstar alumni and represent a really diverse group of people, but also experiences and situations. So just to give some context here, for those of you that I haven't met yet, I'm Julie Winter, and I am new to Northland. I'm the Student Career Advisor. So you can find me over in the Dexter Library. And Jackie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Jackie Moore. As you can see, I'm the Director of Alumni Relations and Annual Giving. Graduated from Northland in 2005, and my role in our community is to keep us connected, whether you're a student who will be an alum eventually, or a graduate who's out in the world and has a lot of experience that could benefit our current students. My role is to try to come up with the ways that best suit us in bringing us together to support each other. So thank you to our alumni for participating in this evening, and thank you to our students for showing up and taking advantage of the priceless experience that our alumni have to share with you tonight. This really is a great opportunity for you to build your network and start making some solid connections that can really help you as you continue on your adventures during Northland and after. So thanks for being here, and thanks again to everybody.
Okay. And again, if you have just joined, feel free to put your major and your year of graduation and what specifically you're interested in getting from the forum into the chat. We'll be monitoring that throughout. There will be time for Q&A at the end, but of course, we'll keep an eye on that as well. Okay, so to give you sort of an overview, we have really, truly a rockstar panel here. And I want to make sure to mention that, our panel of alumni, we worked hard to make sure that we have a good representation from all of the natural and physical sciences, as well as different programs that they are either currently in or have completed, and also different experiences. So we want this to be, a real discussion and a real look at, what the process has been like for them, and to better, prepare you for what it could be. So we're going to move into introductions, and our panelists will just take some time to talk about where they went to grad school, what were they focused on while they were there, their emphasis, thesis, or project, and then experiences related to the program that they were in, as far as advisor relationships, or the size of their research labs, or funding situations, or length of degrees. So we'll get started with that. So Sarah, I'm going to let you go ahead and start for us.
Hello, everybody. It's great to see all these great alumni faces. Thanks for joining us, everybody. So I graduated in 2002, but I would say that my senior capstone project was pivotal to me for really making me realize that I loved learning. I loved the independence of a research project. And so I started that the summer before my senior year, and was then able to work on data analysis with Derek Ogle, nonetheless, who is in this panel today. And just really, loved it and realized I didn't know a lot about the data I was working with and really wanted to keep learning. So I also then had a summer job in the Apostle Islands with the National Park Service. And at that time, I had the opportunity to do rare plant work with a really great botanist. And so I started looking for graduate programs where I could do rare plant ecology. And so I had a very specific interest. And so that limited the pool of potential advisors. And so I started looking to see who's publishing in that field. And I found a woman at East Carolina University who had some funding available for a research project with a federally threatened plant species. And I applied to 5 programs specifically looking for a master's degree at that time. And I would have to say that my advisor, who I worked with at ECU, was by far the most warm and welcoming, and I just got a good feel from her. And so I went. I had excellent mentoring. I think it was really important for me to see a really successful woman in natural resources, because at the time when I was a student at Northland, I had only had one female professor throughout my curriculum of courses that I took. And so then after I finished my master's degree, I realized I still wasn't finished learning, and I also missed Great Lakes forests. And so I sought out a community ecology research project. I really wanted to work with more species, and I ended up getting accepted to UW-Madison. And I actually had an excellent mentor for me personally at Madison. We had a large lab. There were a lot of graduate students. There were postdocs in the lab. So that was actually a very, very vibrant academic experience to have lots of people, not just you and your advisor, who you're bouncing ideas off of and learning from each other. And my PhD advisor, I remember the first lab meeting that I attended, he asked my opinion on something, and I just pulled something off my head, and he was taking notes. And that's when I realized that, oh, this is a different ball game. He actually really respects what I have to say, and considers me a member of a team member, a colleague almost, not quite, and was more hands off and allowed me to be more independent, which was what I needed at that level of working on a PhD. He was not a good advisor for all students in my lab. I would say that in some cases it was probably a toxic mentorship for some of my peers, but for me, I couldn't have asked for a better experience in terms of opening doors professionally to get me where I am today. So I'm going to pass it on.
Awesome. Okay, so Vanya, if you would turn on your camera and kind of go through the same, you have a really interesting sort of path that you took.
Sure. First, hello everyone. Thank you for joining today. So I graduated from Northland in 2005. I majored in chemistry and actually minored in mathematics. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to do research while at Northland. So I actually searched for a summer internship program and managed to get one summer after my junior year. The reason why I say I managed, because I was an international student at the time, so a lot of summer research programs were not available to international students because they're funded through national grants. So I ended up at University of Arkansas for 3 months. I did at that time research in mostly synthetic organic chemistry, which was okay, but it definitely, that experience kind of solidified that I don't want to do extensive research in that particular area. I came back in senior year, I took biochemistry, which I really enjoyed. And I still enjoyed research even after that summer internship. So when I started to search for graduate schools, I started to look at in the chemistry departments, but for the professor, they might be doing some kind of, or professors who were examining biological questions from a chemical standpoint. So one of the universities that I applied to was University of Iowa. And the reason because I applied there was because one professor from that department actually came to visit Northland and talked about how it's a wonderful place it was. So yeah, I applied to University of Iowa. during the application process, I made sure that there are at least 2 or 3 professors that I would like to work for, even though I didn't have to be accepted to any labs before coming to the university itself. So I came there, and my first advisor was in the field of bioinorganic chemistry. We were working on this artificial endonucleases, and unfortunately, after a year or so into my PhD, she left the university for industry. So I had to start all over again. I had to find a new advisor, which was a little bit tough. That was the second professor I was interested in when I was like looking at the University of Iowa. And there I started a project that was fairly interdisciplinary, which I realized that I really liked. It was on the kind of mixture between biochemistry, biophysics, enzymology. And he was I would say a very peculiar individual, in some ways tough or appear tough because he was very straightforward, also international. I particularly like that because I found that he was fair, but even though sometimes strict. He tried to give financial support to all of his students, which I greatly appreciated. He, even though he was supportive, and in a sense, what I mean by that, we had regular meetings. He supported us going to conferences, applying for summer internships, etc. He also gave us later on in the project freedom to push the project in different areas. So, for example, during that time, I found a different mentor, and I was learning and doing some structural biology. Just kind of to wrap it out, I still stayed in academia for a while because I came to then University of California, San Francisco. And I did my postdoc there in a field of, then I shifted completely to biochemistry. I spent there actually also a very long time, around, again, 6 years. I stayed there as a scientist. And now in the last year, I moved to industry, and now I work as a principal scientist in Novartis. So if anybody is interested later on to talk about this transition between academia and industry, I'm free to comment. Yeah, thanks.
Perfect, thank you. I think it's really, important to identify that you didn't go on right to your master's. You went from the bachelor's to the
Yes,
PhD.
that's correct. Sorry, I didn't mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. So I graduated in Northland in 2014. I think I started thinking pretty seriously about what I was going to do afterwards, about my junior year. And I had kind of thought that I wanted to work in like an agency or maybe for a consulting firm. I was really interested in working in streams and rivers and lakes and that sort of thing. And then the summer between my junior and senior year, I worked for what's now the Burke Center. It was just a part of the SOEI back then, under Matt Hudson on the streams team. And that really solidified that I really wanted to go into like probably an agency or consulting. And in order to do that, I likely needed to go to grad school. So I started the whole process. It probably took my GRE in September, started gathering all the application materials. I knew that what I really needed to reach out to professors who I might be interested in working with, because I attended actually the same panel way back when. And so I contacted a few people. I knew I really wanted to work in the Lake Superior watershed, hopefully, but if not there, somewhere probably out west, working in water systems and looking at human influences on natural systems. So I contacted a handful of people, and I really just wasn't having very good luck hearing back from anyone that had any sort of funding. So I just kind of went ahead with my applications. I think my first one was maybe due in December, and that was actually at University of Minnesota Duluth, which was kind of really where I wanted to be because, it's just right on the shore of Lake Superior. And I was still continuing on with the process, still talking to professors, not really having any luck. And then right at the beginning of the year, a professor actually reached out to me who had been passed along my name from someone else who I had gotten a hold of. And he had just come into some funding and asked me if I was interested in joining. So he explained to me a little bit about the project. He asked for a couple of writing samples, other information like that from me, and I decided I wanted to work with him. I kind of jumped into it really quickly because it sounded like a really cool project, exactly where I wanted to be. I probably didn't do my due diligence checking out the advisor and the program, but I got really, really lucky. He was a really good advocate for me throughout grad school, hugely supportive of me and my whole project. So my master's program was on the paleolimnology of the St. Louis River estuary, which is an area of concern, which essentially just means it's a super polluted area. And so we looked at things in sediment cores to give us indicators of how humans have influenced the environment, and then hopefully seeing change after we made certain environmental regulations. So it was a really cool and exciting project. I actually got funding from this program called Minnesota Sea Grant, which some of you guys might be familiar with. There's also the equivalent, Wisconsin Sea Grant. So they paid for me to actually do my graduate degree there and then also work as a research assistantship while I was going to school. So that was kind of unique, at least in my cohort of students. A lot of the other people I was working with were TAs and then had to do their work on top of that. I was lucky enough to actually get paid to work on my program. So I probably had a little bit of a higher workload than some of the other people in my cohort, but I had a really good opportunity to spend a lot of time with what I was doing. It took me about 2 years to graduate. I thought pretty hard about going for my PhD during my program, but I knew I didn't want to teach, and I wasn't really interested in the administrative part of and like being a PI and applying for grants. So I decided to stick with my master's and was lucky enough to continue working in my lab at the University of Minnesota. So just at the Natural Resources Research Institute. That's all.
Perfect, thank you. It looks like we have a student who is part of the Streams crew right now. Just commented. Awesome.
Great.
Okay, so Casey, if you would go ahead and share with us kind of your experience.
Yeah, hi, I'm Casey. I first got interested in grad school working with Eric Olson at Northland, doing some research with him. I really enjoyed doing field work with him and thought it would be probably a good idea to go on and get my master's, just because I thought it was necessary in order to be competitive in the field of what I wanted to do. Coming out of Northland, I graduated in 2016, by the way. Coming out of Northland, I really wanted to work with carnivore species that kind of had not the best relationship in public opinion, just because I think public opinion influences management of those species quite a lot. So I was looking for kind of refined programs. There weren't a lot of ones available when I was looking, and working with carnivore species is typically pretty competitive. So I applied to a lot of different programs and didn't have the best of luck. Sometimes I would hear back from professors and they would be really encouraging and saying that Northland gave me an experience that was quite competitive. I just wasn't the #1 choice. So I took some time between Northland and grad school. I actually worked in Hawaii for a little bit, working at an endangered bird breeding center, which I think gave me a lot of skills that actually applied to my grad work. So I would recommend taking a little bit of time off just to kind of be an adult for real before you go into grad school. And then January 2018, I started at the University of West Georgia. I actually started immediately in my field site, which was actually 4 hours away from the school. So I didn't really get a chance to meet my advisor that well, which looking back on it now was not that good of an idea. And he actually selected my committee members for me, given that I was 4 hours away doing field work immediately, which also is not a good idea. I would recommend picking your own committee members. But what I was doing is I was trapping and collaring eastern spotted skunks, which are a small carnivore. They're about the size of a gray squirrel. And they're declining rapidly in their range, and nobody really knows why. So what I was doing is trapping and collaring them to see how they were using different landscapes. And overall, my cohort was very small, which I really appreciated. It was a very Northland type feel, and I made some really great friends there. I unfortunately did not have the best experience in grad school overall, given primarily my advisor, and then kind of trying to figure out how to address that a little too late in the game. I think it's very important that if you see red flags with your advisor, you address them early. I wish somebody would have told me that. But I did end up finishing after 2.5 years with my master's in biology. And now I am back up in the Northwoods, actually like a block down from Northland. So I'm enjoying it up here and looking for jobs in a pandemic and a Trump administration. So it's a little difficult, but we're making it work.
Thanks so much for sharing that perspective. I know we'll get into more about kind of the advisor pieces. So Michelle, you are up. Michelle on the line.
There, you hear me?
There we go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, so yeah, I graduated in 2019 with the geology degree. I did both chemistry and environmental studies for my minors in Northland. I worked a summer at the Burke Center lab, which was really influential, as well as I had a really amazing capstone project as well. So I was working with Dave Ullman doing this cosmogenic nuclide exposure, like terrestrial cosmogenics project, which is, basically dating rocks, but it's very different than, carbon dating. So it's a much larger time scale. And I really loved that experience at Northland. I was super, super lucky to get that opportunity. It wasn't just like, something I was sought out. It was kind of handed to me, and I was very lucky. But I liked it so much, I kind of wanted to continue with it. I did take a year off after Northland, and I worked sort of pseudo-geology. I was working in a rock shop, and I was also working gem shows. So I was kind of traveling around. I got to go to Tucson and a couple other shows in the area. And, then when the pandemic hit, it was kind of almost motivation for me to get back in school and really try to follow up with the things that I really enjoyed through Northland. It kind of made me think things through and realize I want to follow through on it. So I also was really lucky to sort of be handed this position here where I am now at North Carolina State. I have a family here, and my aunt and uncle live in town and work at the college, and recommended that there was a professor who does cosmogenics. It's a very small world. Once you get into that niche, you know almost everybody. There's really only two sites in the country that are used for dating. So I was communicating with Lewis, my advisor here, for almost a year before I, actually decided to submit my application, and got my news back about 2 weeks later, and moved here 3 months after that. So it all went really fast once I decided to go for it. And I am enjoying it here. It's difficult to adjust to the online life for sure, because I took a year off, so I didn't figure out Zoom until I moved here in the fall. But I'm getting the hang of it. I'm a TA right now, and I am enjoying it quite a bit so far. There's challenges, but it's been worth it so far.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, and then Megan.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. So like a few other people, I'm a Burke Center alum. I was on the lakes and wetland crew, not streams. And that kind of led me into this realization that I love learning. I love doing field work and was able to make connections at the Burke Center with my advisor, Matt Cooper, who kind of led me to my advisor at Grand Valley State University, where I'm going for my master's right now. I knew I wanted to stay in the Great Lakes region, working with wetlands and ecology, so it worked out great. And I'm going to Grand Valley, where one of my committee members is an old Burke Center alum, Kim Oldenburg. So that's kind of cool to see the whole Northland connection web coming into play. So like Elizabeth, I got a GA ship, so I got full funding for my program, so I don't have to teach. It is a little more intense, but it's been pretty awesome so far. I've been working with drowned river mouth, ecology, and the effects of shoreline and watershed development. And I should be done in April, so really excited about that.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I mean, that was kind of the overview. Now, what I'd love to do is just sort of get into, let's talk timeline. So, you know, for students, you know, that are maybe just considering, or like they're pretty sure, or they're at different, you know, stages in their sort of, you know, making up their mind, what are the things that they should be thinking about now while they're still a student? You know, what are the things for them to weigh? So I know Sarah and Vanya, you had some points on here, and Megan, and all right, Sarah, I'm calling you out.
I think I'll just say that I think that registration is coming up pretty soon. So I would encourage students who are here during in this forum to speak with their academic advisors and let them know that, you know, graduate school may be something that you are interested in the future, and that, you know, and your advisor can help you think about what are some of the courses that you should be taking now before your last semester of your senior year, so that you can be a little bit more competitive in some programs. So there are certain course requirements to get into some programs. So you could start looking at information online for programs that you're kind of interested in potentially, and just get a sense for what are those requirements. Occasionally you can have those waived. For example, I did not have physics when I was an undergraduate student, and I needed that for my PhD program. I also needed another year of language, foreign language, that I didn't have. And so I ended up having those waived, and I still got admitted, but I ended up needing to take a physics course and a language course while I was pursuing my PhD. So that wasn't that ideal. There's a few other things I could add, but I'm going to let others speak up first.
Yeah, so Vanya, I know that you had some input to give as far as like the time and money investment sort of weighing.
Yes, so I'm really this huge proponent of this summer programs, and also if you have a ability, apply for and spend, you know, gain that research experience in some other institution, especially if you're looking into applying directly to a PhD. I think that truly helps a lot. And I even noticed later on when I was at UCSF that almost all the students applying had some sort of, either they worked as a tech in the lab, or they had some summer research experience. Yeah. If I reflect now on the process that I had to undergo, I think starting and planning a year ahead of the time when you want to apply, could be a good thing. Yeah.
Good. Casey, go ahead and jump in.
I just wanted to mention from the wildlife perspective and the natural resources perspective, something I didn't really appreciate when I was at Northland is all of the opportunities I had to like gain field skills that would make me rather competitive when applying to grad school, just because a lot of other universities are teaching more like theory-based stuff, when really what these advisors might be looking for is someone who knows how to like navigate in the woods or knows how to use a GPS accurately. So at least in like the small realm that I have experience in, all of the field courses at Northland, I would just recommend taking all of those you can. And if you have the opportunity to do research with a professor, I would highly recommend that as well, because that will definitely set you ahead of some other candidates.
Really good advice. Important advice.
Yeah. I can just echo that with lab experience. I had a very similar experience at Northland where, getting the chemistry minor allowed me to get this job at the Burke Center lab. I also, during my capstone, got some parsonage funding to do about a month or so at a cosmogenics lab at UW-Madison. Madison's my hometown. So that was just a nice connection. Someone Dave knew at Madison was willing to walk us through it for a few weeks and just show us how the process worked. That made me so much more competitive. It really made me feel like I had my pick of grad schools instead of having to, beg a professor for teaching me.
Let's see, I think Megan had some points just about like timelines. Some of the others did mention this as well, but
yeah, I think like it's never too early to start looking and thinking about, what you want to do, what you're interested in, and where you want to take your future, even though that's going to change a million times anyway. So I started looking for schools and advisors around fall, and started applying like around this time, November-ish. And typically you hear back by about like April, I think is the latest. But if you have an advisor in mind and they are willing to work with you, usually they are at least verbally committed well before then, which is stress relief to have that locked down. But I think just knowing like what you want, like where you want to go regionally, and narrowing down by looking at professors in that region, or like vice versa, however it works best for you. I knew I wanted to stay in the Great Lakes, so I looked for advisors working with ecology in that area. So knowing like what you want and what you're interested in, I think is the first step. And then going forward, talking to advisors, at least in NRM from there.
okay. Sarah, I think you maybe want to jump in. Maybe not. Okay.
Sorry,
Oh,
I got it. Sorry. Even if you're not sure if you're going to do grad school, I think it's really important for all students now to realize that this is the time to really start working on developing your relationships and networking, and get to know your faculty. They are going to be your letter writers. You do need letters of recommendation, and for graduate school, it's best if most of those letters are academic letters. It's probably okay if like at least one, might be a supervisor letter of recommendation, but you probably are going to need to have at least a couple, 2-3 letters of recommendation. And yeah, just something to think about. Keep your grades up.
good point. Okay, so, all right, they're thinking about it now. Maybe they're like at the point where they're ready to apply. So, or getting ready to apply. What are the things specifically at that stage that they should be thinking about? Do they have to take some kind of a test? Are there differences in the different kinds of fields and programs? Where do you find opportunities? So, Sarah, if you would start us off there, and then anybody else who wants to jump in, feel free to use the raise hand feature.
Yeah, sure. So I think one thing to keep in mind is that different graduate programs have different methods of applying to that program. So in the ecological sciences and many of the biological programs, wildlife ecology, natural resources, conservation, bio, you're going to reach out to potential advisors. So you'll send an email to someone who you could see yourself working with and doing research with, and you inquire about the possibility of an opening in their research lab or a grad program. And they will let you know if you seem like you might be a good fit, and they may want to interview you, and then they will suggest that you go ahead and apply to the graduate program. And in many cases, your chances of getting into graduate school are very limited if you simply just apply to the graduate program without having made that contact with a potential advisor. I served on a graduate admissions committee at UW-Madison for my program, and it was really eye-opening. There were probably, hundreds of applications that we didn't look at, and we only really looked at the applications for the students who had written that they had made contact with potential advisors, but that's not always the case. So I know in chemistry, for example, and some of our other programs, and even sometimes in some of the biological sciences, you will apply directly through the program, and then you may figure out who your advisor is going to be later. So if you're not sure what the process is for a specific program, I recommend just contacting the graduate school staff person, who is like the staff, and they're going to be in charge of graduate studies for that program, and just ask, what is the general way that you get into that program? And I see that hands have come up, so I'm going to pass it on.
Yeah. Perfect. Megan, I think you were ready to pop in there.
Yeah, so I think it's also worthwhile to note that even if you don't get necessarily a positive response from an advisor, however that looks, if it's just that they don't have funding, don't have a position available, they're retiring or something, if you are able to keep that line of communication open, and they're usually willing to follow up with, I know someone who is looking, and that can be a great doorway to somewhere else that you just had no idea of, because there is a whole network of connections and communication that goes on that you really don't see from the student perspective until you get further along.
Point. Vanya, I think you have.
Yeah, I would just like to kind of follow up on what Sarah said. So I applied and I got my PhD from chemistry department, and I did apply to the department itself, but I think it's quite important to actually look and contact the professors that are still within the department, because my first advisor, that first project that I really wanted to work on, she had limited funding, and the fact that I contacted her when I came to visit the university, I actually met with her separately, really helped me later to be selected in her lab. So yeah, it's still good to reach out.
Don't be shy. Let's see, Michelle, I think you're ready to add in.
All right. Yeah, I think I failed to mention this in my introduction, but since I've come here to NC State, I've been pretty active in the Graduate Student Association, the GSA, and I actually serve on a committee that's focused towards diversity. It's the other side of our community climate committee, so it focuses more on bringing students into the grad school and a more diverse group of students. And one of the things we focus on a lot is that step of reaching out to your professors, potential advisors, and whatnot, because that can be a barrier for a lot of students. And, programs are kind of trying to step away from that a little bit, but it's so ingrained in academia that that's really like the only option there is right now. So there's more creative ways you can do it. It might seem really intimidating to just reach out to a professor and say, I'm interested in your work, because you're an undergrad and you don't feel equal to them yet. But there are some other things you could say, like, do you have any papers you think could be expanded on? Or like, what are you working on right now that really interests you? And, you do kind of have to get over that step of imposter syndrome and really put yourself out there. It's hard, but it's worth it.
Such good advice. Megan, did you have something more to add there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to Michelle's point. It's also really helpful if you read some of their papers. Just go to Google Scholar, Google their name, university, whatever it is, or go through their faculty page and look at their recent publications. Because then shows that you are interested, you've done a little bit of your homework, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a leg up because it shows that you really do want to work with them and you're not just sending out a mass email.
Very
Yeah,
important point.
Fully agree. I feel like professors could even like ignore if you just send the cookie cutter email. Like it should be personalized to each person you reach out to.
I know I wanted to touch on the point that came up previously about, so, you know, it is possible to look for positions on listservs, but Sarah, you had some kind of feedback about that. As far as, you know, if you go that route, looking on those listservs, you know, sometimes those can, yeah.
Yeah, so there are many graduate research assistantships that are advertised on listservs. Right now, the trend is Twitter. Everyone loves to post their grad position on Twitter. So if you're not on Twitter, there's a science Twitter that you might find helpful. But keep in mind that you can still get into graduate school even if you don't get accepted for one of those advertised RA, research assistantship positions. There are teaching assistantship positions. And so in that case, you may end up, you know, doing a research project on something that may not have grant funding from your mentor, but you might have opportunities to seek out your own grant funding through the university or external funding, or you might just get it funded through, you know, teaching. So keep in mind that those advertised positions are going to be fairly competitive sometimes. And so don't limit yourself to just applying to those advertised positions. You can contact people and ask, do you have research projects right now? Do you have funding? And they may have funding that they haven't even advertised yet.
Very important mention. Megan, did you have something to add on there?
I think that's just residual hand up, sorry.
No problem. Okay, so I know we wanted to also make sure that we mentioned about, you know, visiting the school and others that you're interested in. So Michelle and Vanya, I know you had, you know, points that you wanted to mention on that.
Yeah, I can start. Visiting school, I think, is extremely important. Because you can actually in person interact with other graduate students from the department. They tend to have these events where they invite, let's say, 10, 15 grad students. And you can really get sometimes even the gossip of the department. So, or even information about certain professors, because sometimes you would talk directly to a student in a particular lab that you're interested in, and you might get kind of rosy picture. But in this kind of events, you might get more information. And by that I mean, how does this professor work? Are they more hands-on, hands-off? Is there in general a lot of pressure in the department? Do people collaborate in the department? Do people mostly have funding, etc.? So those are all the things that I feel can be gained from that visit to school. Another thing that I would just like to tell, I know that we were planning to maybe later on discuss that, but regarding like choosing your advisor, professor, I think it's also important to see in what stage of career that potential professor is. And what that means, is this like a new, fresh assistant professor, or this a professor with a 10-year established career, has been working 30 years in the field? And with assistant professorship, it can be great. They're very motivated. You will get published. Because their career depends on your career. However, the tempo sometimes in those kind of labs can be extremely, oh, sorry, I didn't turn on my camera, can be extremely intense. So yeah, that's also what you can gather during that time. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Casey, I think you had wanted to jump in just about the piece about trying to connect with, you know, not only the advisor, but other people, you know, faculty members and things like that ahead of time? Was there something you wanted to add on?
Yeah, I think contacting the advisor you're interested in working with current lab is very important. Unfortunately, though, like was mentioned before, they're relying on that professor's recommendation going forward. So they're not really going to be completely honest with you if they aren't the best person to work with. So what I wish I would have done is just talk to other faculty in the department, just to like see, even if they're not going to like blatantly say that you shouldn't work with this person, you usually can like insinuate from certain, I don't want to say vibes, but vibes that it's just not the best person to work with. Like I mentioned earlier, I spent a week on campus before I went to my field site, so I didn't really have that opportunity, unfortunately. But once I got back and kind of like became actually a present part of the department, I kind of saw what I already knew, what was happening, kind of. So I don't know. This might be a little off topic, but if you find yourself in kind of like not the best situation with your project or with your advisor, I know when I was going through it at first, I thought, oh, this like everyone has a great experience in grad school because that's all I've ever heard. So I was placing a lot of the responsibility and blame for it not being the best experience on me. And I think just being vocal with it, like honest with your advisor, but also with other people in the department, could be easier to find people who would support you. I was already too far in my research to switch advisors, but if you are having a bad experience and you do reach out to other advisors, there are probably other advisors who would be a better fit for you and would actually offer to take you under their wing so you could switch projects. Yeah, that's my biggest advice, is never to feel like you're stuck, because there's always another project, another advisor, or even another school. So yeah. Sorry for that tangent, but
no, it's important to say. I think, you know, without that being out there, you know, students might not know that that's an option. So I know we have Megan and Elizabeth who wanted to add into.
I think it's also useful to use ratemyprofessor.com, which, you know, keep in mind there's a lot of biased people on there. They either have really great experiences or really bad experiences. Some of them could be freshmen from Bio 101 who thought the class was too hard, or they could be a master's student who had a wonderful experience and left a raving review. So, you know, doing stuff like that can also give you little hints on what your advisor may or may not be like.
I'll just add in, I guess, to really echo everyone else. If you do get a chance to visit, it can be a really helpful experience just to get a feel of the culture of the school, and even just talking to other students in the cohort, people outside of the lab have a really good idea of what's going on with everyone else. Like my advisor professor didn't actually teach, and he had worked in a remote field lab. So a lot of people didn't know him and his style, but knew a lot of the people in his lab. And then they were able to relate to me that they were really happy. They seemed to have good workloads, and we're getting along pretty well.
Okay, what about, so we're still talking about, like, you know, a lot of you have alluded to like the funding. So help us break it down. What does funding mean? Which positions are funded? Which positions aren't funded? And, you know, what goes along with those? So Casey, if you wanted to add in.
Just the position I had, I applied through Texas A&M, so it was a research assistantship. But there are different types of research assistantships. So for mine, I worked on a completely separate research project for the state of Alabama where I acquired my funding. And then on top of that, I also did my thesis research, which was also funded by the state of Alabama. So you could possibly be working on 2 completely different projects. Or if you're lucky, you'll just be paid to work on your own project. And then a lot of the people in my cohort were TAs, so they were funded through the school to teach, and then also had their project on the side that was a little more up to them on what they wanted to do with the input of their advisor as well.
Elizabeth, did you want to add on?
Yeah, so I mentioned this in my bio earlier, but I was able to come on under a fellowship under Sea Grant, and there are similar fellowships that are available from NSF and a few other programs that will actually provide funding to do research on the project that you're doing. But a lot of the people in my cohort were actually funded just by TAs. So the people who were teaching, they had a little bit more flexibility in their projects, so they got to do a little bit more of what they wanted, whereas my fellowship, I had pretty strict lines of things that I had to fulfill to be able to answer to this grant, which actually worked really well for me because I was pretty flexible. I didn't really know what I wanted to go into exactly. I was just like interested in a field in general and ended up really, really liking the project I was on. But the other people who were teaching had a lot more flexibility. We also had a number of students that had alternative fundings like the GI Bill, and those people had a lot more flexibility and a lot of times weren't necessarily on a thesis track anyway. So a lot of programs will have thesis versus like a project track, and a thesis track, you work on a really big project and you create a really big paper. And that's the most traditional way of doing grad school, but there's also more course-based paths that you can do where you just take a higher course load and you have a much smaller project, like more of an end of semester or a capstone project or something that only takes 6 months of working on rather than 2 full years of research.
Really important distinction. Michelle, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I can just talk a little bit more about touring as well, and maybe some good questions to ask, because the funding is a really important question to ask. So I actually toured NC State twice before I even submitted an application because I was super apprehensive about leaving Wisconsin. I had my whole home, my whole life, lived there for 21 years and had never moved. So I knew it was going to take a lot to get me out of the state and get over to the East Coast. And so I was really careful before I committed to this school. I was able to tour once where I got to sit down with a full group of students. They do coffee hours every week, and some really important information I garnered from them about housing. It's like a really important thing to ask if you're moving to a different state. Is there available places to live? Is it affordable? Funding, am I going to have to get a second job? Is that even possible to get a second job? Or is the funding feasible? I am fully as far as I know, everyone in my department, which is Department of Marine, Earth, and Atmospheric Science, is covered under what's called the Graduate Student Support Plan. So everyone gets a GSSSP. It's either set up for your master's or for your PhD, and it's either a TA or an RA. So you kind of get to pick, and it changes each year. So right now I'm a TA for this semester. I'm TAing again next semester. But then once I get further into my project, I'll be doing just research. I'll be taking on research credits instead of right now I'm doing about 20 hours a week of school, teaching, grading, assisting with the lab I'm working for. And then that'll transition into, maybe half and half. I'll TA one class and then do research the other half of the time. But yeah, that's really important things to ask about. I think another really important thing to ask about is, is it thesis track, or how does the degree actually work? What will your defense look like? Even though that seems like it's far off, it's important to think about, especially if you're considering just a master's, which is don't downplay a master's. I think it's a really valid, important, useful degree. And one of the things I really like about this program, or the professor that I'm studying under, is that I don't have to write a thesis that's separate from what I publish. The program is writing to publish. So we're going to try and do a research project that I get to take the reins on and really design it myself. I'm writing all the proposals for it right now. It's a lot of work when you're writing proposals and teaching and taking classes, but that's kind of what I wanted to throw myself into. So I'm enjoying it. And I think it's worth it more so than having to write, you know, like at Northland, I wrote it, my capstone was 21 pages long. And then when we were going to publish and hoping to publish it, I had to condense it down to 4 pages, you know. Sometimes it's not worth it to do all that, you know, and that's the reason I still haven't published yet, is I can't edit it down. So it's worth it to consider, you know, do I want my name out there in publications? Do I want to get more papers under my belt, or do I want to get like lab experience and work experience, or do you want teaching experience? And, you know, if you want all of that, maybe it is good to go for like a more general program, which is, you know, what I went for.
And actually that was just another point, and maybe Sarah can touch on this before we move to the next section, but just as far as like, does the name of the program or degree actually matter? You know, and or is it based on kind of what field you're going into? Sarah, I know you had your hand up before, and maybe I'm wondering.
Yeah, my hand was up. I just wanted to, I'm going to comment quickly on the funding thing first. I'll just say that in the sciences, in many cases, you are being paid to be in graduate school. And I would say that there's an increasing number of online graduate programs that are opening up. And I think that for the most part, those are for-profit graduate programs. So I would really look at those very cautiously. Do you really want to invest more money in your education? If you feel like that's your only option, well then, you know, it might be better than not, depending on what you want to do. But I would really try hard to get a graduate program where you're receiving a living wage. You're going to be able to pay for your housing. You're going to be able to eat. It's going to feel like a job. It's not going to be the same as that undergrad experience. And you're hopefully working on something that you really like. So I'll just throw that out there. You're not going to go broke in grad school necessarily. And then moving on to the next point, the name of many graduate programs is really more of a function. It's an administrative name often. So you may get a graduate degree in, say, biology, because that's the department name. And like some schools historically would have had, you know, a zoology, botany, geology, like lots of departments, and many of those have collapsed into just a few departments. So your graduate degree may have a broad name, but your specialty, your emphasis is going to be a little bit distinct. So I would say don't worry about the name of the degree. That's my opinion. There are people at UW-Madison in a zoology department who are doing terrestrial vegetation and fire ecology. So I would say look for the researcher and the research more than the name of a program.
Awesome. Okay, so all right, let's move on to like, what do you consider during the application process? So like there's a whole bunch that you need to figure out, you know, before you've decided on a place that you're going to apply to. But once you're ready, you're in it, you're applying, you know, how do you stand out? What about application due dates? I think Megan had kind of mentioned that, but I'm wondering if it's different for anybody else. We talked about how financing already, but what about materials? You know, a CV versus a resume, letters of recommendation, letter of intent, you know, all of those different things. You know, those materials, you know, what should students know? Sarah, I'm going to pick on you. Oh, wait, Elizabeth.
So it's really overwhelming to start the whole process, but I think it's really important to stay organized. I think I created a really big spreadsheet where I put all of the programs I was interested in and all the required materials, the due dates, everything. So I had it in one place that was localized. I think it's really, really important to start working on your letter of intent and your CV, which are probably going to be widely required things really early on, and use the resources at Northland that they have to review those for you. just because those are really important. That's like something I attached all of the emails to the professors I was interested in working with so that they could tell a little bit about me besides what I wrote in the blurb in the email. You'll attach the CV and your letter of intent for them there. So to be able to do that early on is really important, and just make sure you have enough time to do everything. Asking someone to write a letter of recommendation is a really big deal, I guess, and it's good to give that person at least like 3 weeks to write the letter for you, just so they can put enough time into it and they aren't being rushed in that process.
Really important points there. Sarah?
I'll just add that it does take a long time, and we do enjoy writing letters for our really good students, so don't hesitate to ask. And on that note, please ask your letter writers if they can write a good letter for you. Really build that relationship. You should know, you should be confident in what that letter writer is going to be able to say about you.
I don't know if it's been brought up yet, but I'm going to mention the GRE, since I know that's probably a lot of people are scared of it. But like I said about diversity, a thing, and especially during COVID, the GRE is becoming less and less important for graduate applications. I would say it should be the bottom of your list of these things to consider during the application process. It's literally just a number. It's not going to make you stand out more than your statement of purpose will. Your background, your CV is going to make you stand out a lot more than a grade you got on a 4-hour test that was very expensive. So I would just say, if that's something that's holding you back from considering grad school, just forget about it.
And there are many schools that aren't requiring it actually anymore, I believe. Elizabeth, did you want to jump in?
Oh, sorry, I think that's from earlier, but I just agree with everything that Michelle just said. It's totally just a number. People don't care about it very much anymore. I hate standardized tests and never perform well in them, and just got like perfectly adequate score, and it just didn't impact the process for me at all.
We do have a question. Are letters of recommendation from supervisors from internships okay to use, or is it preferable to use from academics? Really good question.
I think they're great. I think, yes, if you can have a supervisor from an internship, someone outside of your institution where you got your degree, it's really a fantastic addition. It shouldn't be your only letter, but one of the three, they view it great.
And I would imagine being specific about, what they're focusing on, in their letter about, what they're speaking to about your experience too. So I know that, Sarah, you wanted to make a point about waiving rights to see letters of recommendation.
Yeah, I'll just say that when you apply for graduate school, you're going to fill out a form. You're going to list the people who are going to write letters of recommendation for you, and then while you're doing that, you're going to fill out a form, and it's going to ask you if you waive your right to see the letters of recommendation. And it feels good to waive your rights to anything, but most of my faculty colleagues they tell me, I ask them all what their opinion is on that, and they say that you should waive your rights. That it's like you should feel good about who you're asking to write your letters, and and if you're not sure, you need to outright ask them, are you able to write a good letter? And that's simply because I'm told that some graduate programs will see that you've waived your right, or that you have not waived your right to read the letter of recommendation, and they may not take that letter very seriously. I was told that's especially true in chemistry, and I think it's all program to program. I personally feel a little bit hesitant to even say that to you, that you should waive your rights, but I would just, something that you want to think about the implications of it either way.
Okay. So talking now about, you've been accepted, you're there, what was it like, we talked about this a little in the intros, but if there's anything else that any of the panelists wanted to mention as far as like, how big was your cohort, what were your time commitments, all of those types of pieces. Either Megan or Michelle, not on the right screen. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in my experience, there's a lot of orientation stuff, which is not as fun as outdoor orientation. But it's a lot of useful information for sure. But a lot of the time there's like this, I don't know, culture that like during grad school, whether it's master's or PhD, like you have to be working all the time. If you're not pulling all-nighters and like living off coffee, then you're not doing it right, which is not true. Like there's still a lot of empowerment, and you have to be able to balance like figuring out like your working, your school, and like your personal life. And it's okay to have one during grad school. It's not gonna slow you down at all to enjoy yourself. And there's, a lot of the biology NRM programs have this really fun, interesting group of people. And in my experience at Grand Valley and kind of going to other schools, meeting other people at conferences, it's kind of useful that, going out for beer or coffee or pizza is, a great way to decompress with your cohort, which is usually very small, whether you're at like a huge university or not. Typically your cohort is only like a handful of people, maybe like 30 tops, maybe. And then within that, it gets even more specific. So there's opportunity to build relationships with close friends. And there's definitely time to enjoy yourself, build a life, put down roots if you want. It's not just school and work all the time. It doesn't have to be.
Elizabeth, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I unfortunately had a really, really small cohort when I joined. I think there were probably only like 4 of us because there was a really big change in professors. A lot of people retired, so they just didn't bring very many people on. And all of the other people in my cohort had like families and kids, were a lot older than I was. So it was kind of hard to build that community, and I really missed that my first year of grad school. But the next year, my second year, there was a big new batch of kids, and so I got to have that connection, which was great. But it was really nice to have a social life outside of it. I actually got a job as a waitress just to kind of like do something else, make money, of course. But I had a really community totally unrelated to grad school, which was honestly so nice to decompress and not talk about like science in my free time all the time. So I recommend that.
Are there any other points, just as far as like what it's actually like when you're there, or students, if you have questions? Sarah, go ahead. Sarah.
You're muted, Sarah.
Sorry. I just want to make it clear that it's pretty well understood, and there's a lot of articles out there online. You can read up on it, but mental health in graduate school is a big concern. So definitely be aware that there are many graduate students that do not have very good experiences, and mental health ends up being a challenge for them to manage during that time. So it's really, really important to know who your advisor is, like what's the culture like in the lab you're going to be working in, what your personality is and what your needs are. I think those are important to consider.
Yeah, I will just agree with that and echo that. And another thing that I learned from like touring the school is that I learned they do coffee hour every day and that every week they go out for trivia. And, all of that has ended because of COVID. But during COVID, we have a Discord server that all of the MEIS students are on. And we share memes together and we play Among Us online. And, it's different because of COVID. It's really different. And, I'm not getting that first year of college experience, but I chose the department because I knew I would feel supported there still, even during a pandemic where we're all stuck at home.
Right. I want to make sure that we're answering this question that came up from the student. What's your advice for students who want to wait a year after graduating before going to grad school?
I think it's great. It's many people make a pause, or as I mentioned before, when I was looking what type of graduate students were coming to UCSF, where I worked prior to joining this company, a lot of them worked for like 2-3 years, gained some experience, or went into a field that to gain experience to become more competitive even for graduate school. So I think it's a great thing.
And I think Sarah's point in the chat just about, maintaining your communication with those people who are going to be writing your letters is just a really important thing, obviously, if you are going to be taking time off. Okay, keep those questions coming. But, looking back kind of at your experience for the panelists, what is it like for those of you who have finished, quote unquote, do you feel like grad school was the right situation for you? Would you be in the position that you're in right now without that degree? Vanya and Sarah, I know, had some points, and Elizabeth on this.
I definitely wouldn't have a job that I have right now if I didn't get a PhD. I would say like my path, I during my whole career, I definitely changed fields. I did very basic enzymology research in my PhD, realized that I needed more applied projects to feel satisfied. So that's why I came to UCSF, because it's a medical school. So I studied one of the mechanisms of antibiotic resistance. Fortunately, there isn't much effort to push to get new antibiotics. So later on, when I loved academic research, but I didn't want to be a PI, and I wanted to do research and be actively kind of contributing to novel medicine. So that's why I ended up here now in Novartis, where I'm working on new oncology, therapeutics in oncology, specifically breast cancer. But none of it, now when I look at it, I didn't need my postdoc experience for the job that I have, but I feel like all of that kind of put me in a better position than I'm now, because it makes you very adaptable. And I think one of the best things about doing a PhD is, you get technical expertise, but you will never stop learning. Even now in my job, I'm doing some new stuff that I've never done before. But really, when you do PhD, it teaches you how to think scientifically, how to ask questions, how to search for important questions, and then gives you like courage to find ways, innovative ways to find them. So I'll just give one example. When I was going through qualifying exams, we had to write this original research proposal, and it was horrible. Like, this was my lowest point of PhD. If I didn't pass that, I would never do PhD again if I had to go through that period. When you go, you're so worried that you don't know these answers. But then you go in front of this faculty and you realize they don't also know answers. They're not questioning you on the right answer. They're questioning your thought process. And if you're a curious individual, I would say, you should think about going to grad school.
We had a question. How did you know you wanted to go for a PhD? What are reasons to go for a PhD other than a bigger salary?
I'll just say I'm not sure that a PhD gives you a bigger salary always. I'll just say that. It's passion for learning, curiosity. I really loved how you stated that.
I would argue.
I was writing, but I can just say I agree with Sarah. I mean, getting a PhD. So Sarah wrote it took her 6 years. It took me also like 6.5. If your sole motivation is bigger salary, don't do PhD. There are people here, same level. They came with masters. It's just you can get and start like earning. You don't need a PhD. That's what I'm getting at. It's too long and too painful of a process to be motivated just by money.
Michelle, I know you wanted to add in there.
I was going to make just about the exact same comment that I would argue money is the reason not to do PhD. It would be a good reason to go into like an industry or try and build job experience more so than, PhD is really more about your passion project, and you want to bring your research interests to life, and you want to spend a lot of time studying that one small area or small thing that means a lot to you.
I'll just add that I would not have my job without a PhD. So, I mean, there are positions out there that you're not going to get without the PhD. So I think you just really want to be very focused on, what is your dream career? You don't have to know that now. I didn't know I was going to teach until I got my job, and now I'm here. And I'm really thankful for that. And I love my job. I will say that I've worked harder as a professor than I did in grad school, and I thought grad school was very, very challenging. There's a lot of ups and downs. Things don't get easier after grad school.
Vanya, I'm hoping you're going to answer this question. Is it harder to stand out for a PhD program than a master's program coming right out of undergrad?
I don't think so. When I was applying for a PhD, our incoming class was, I don't remember anymore. Like, let's say of 15, 20 students, maybe a third of them had a master's or so, roughly. And it's like a benefit, but it could be like another year of working instead of master's. It was not required. Wanted to say something else, but now. Oh yes, if I may say one more thing that crossed my mind, kind of to follow up on what Sarah said. When it comes to career exploration, I honestly don't think that process sometimes ever finishes. So don't get stressed out that you have to answer all your questions about your life. Even after during my postdoc, I was joining some workshops, and I was doing some career exploration, staying in academia, going to industry, science communication, this medical liaison. There are a lot of opportunities. So just don't get too stressed out. You'll figure it out.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that I think it does vary a little bit by field, whether or not they typically expect you to go straight into a PhD program. I think chemistry is a lot more, people go straight into PhDs more frequently, but in like the natural resources, at least in my program, water resources science, they would very rarely accept people straight from undergrad into a PhD program unless you had a lot of laboratory research experiences, or if you had like some gap years and some experience outside of college. That was something that really helped people get into PhD programs without a master's. But a lot of times a master's is the project that you do during that, and especially a thesis-based master's is a good thing to have if you want to pursue a PhD.
I know that Michelle commented on the question in the chat, but I do want to just say it out. what do you recommend doing during a gap year between undergrad and a grad program? If anybody wanted to add in. So Michelle had mentioned, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Sorry, I can talk just real briefly. So I was responding actually to the question about what do you recommend or what steps should you take if you know you want to be a professor? Definitely TAing early on is something I would recommend, because I thought that teaching was for me, and then I'm TAing my first semester, and I'm just gonna be honest, right now I'm like not having a great experience with it. And I think a big portion of that is because it's all online and I don't get face-to-face time with my students at all. And it's actually a fully asynchronous course, which means we don't even have a Zoom meeting or Teams like this. They just do their work and I grade the work and return it to them. And so that's kind of made me glad that I didn't go right into that PhD because I don't know if it's for sure for me, but yeah, it's hard, and it's given me a whole new perspective on academia. So I think it was really useful. Another thing I would recommend, next semester I'm actually taking a course in geoscience education. So it's about building the skills to be a good teacher, not just specifically for education, but for geoscience education. So I think that that's going to help me a lot. So taking courses like that, if you know for sure you want to teach, you can even, there's a few students in our department who are specifically studying geoscience education. So there's options for, knowing you want to go professor track.
There's a really good question on the chat also. Knowing that we're still under the COVID pandemic, what do you think that we as students are limited from that could potentially benefit us? Are there alternatives or substitutes that could help us potentially obtain these essential qualities and knowledge that would be helpful in grad school and moving forward from grad to PhD or in general toward a certain career? Really good question. Yeah, Michelle.
I can actually talk to that too, because I think the biggest barrier for me is field work. So the project I was supposed to take on, and that the big selling point of me coming down here to North Carolina was that I was going to get to join this project that was supposed to take me to Mount Everest. So we were going to be looking at erosion rates around Khumbu, Nepal, and I was super jazzed about it. I spent my whole gap year, this is answering another question in the chat about what to do in your gap year, read papers, read geology, read the big journals, read a lot of papers. And I was reading all these papers on Mount Everest, super excited to do this project. And then I got here and we realized there's no way we're going to go to Mount Everest in 2 years. So I am completely restructuring my my master's study to do another high mountain, but here in the United States, out in California, Mount Whitney as my field site. So if you want to do field work outside of the country during COVID, I would recommend waiting.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of people say to take stats also. I just want to point that out. Vanya, I know you had something to add.
Yes, so this would be a follow-up on one of the questions here. Destiny asks, what was the original? What steps should I take in grad school if I want to become a professor? And I guess my follow-up question was if she was interested in an undergrad type of institution like Northland that is mostly teaching school, or what they call R01. These are like primarily research institutions. So what is the difference? I guess if you want to go to a smaller college, teaching type of college, what is really more important is that you do have some teaching experience, that you, so during your graduate school, now it's good. It's also nice to have like outreach experience. We, for example, when I was at UCSF, we went and they brought students from underdeserving communities, and we showed them around the labs, and we did some experiments with them. So all of these things are important if that's ultimately your goal. If your ultimate goal is a research type of institution, during your PhD, it's quite important that you do publish, that you publish well, and that you have several publications. And in today's world, if you want to get to R1 institution in the end, you usually have to do some kind of postdoc. So this is like, you really have to be committed to research. Yeah. Let me know if you have other follow-up questions.
Our panelists are amazing on this chat. You're keeping up on everything. Thank you. So another one was, would you say in the science field in terms of field work, is ArcGIS something preferred? See Michelle nodding. Somebody has a hand.
Yeah, I do GIS every day for my geology fieldwork. I'm taking a GIS class. All of my classes require GIS skills as well as MATLAB or Python skills. If you're interested in doing any of this modeling, I highly recommend learning Python script because it is a whole new language.
Yeah, GIS is huge, especially right now during COVID when fieldwork is much more difficult, if not impossible. So remote sensing is huge right now. So if I could go back to Northland and redo anything, I would definitely take more GIS classes and math classes, as hard as that is for me to say. Stats was awesome at Northland, and totally, I did not appreciate it enough because Derek is amazing and his code is amazing. Because I learned the hard way that there's a long way to do it, and Derek gives you the easy way.
Some advice.
I will just say I only took one class with Derek like my sophomore year, and I so regretted it. R has been just, it's a huge part of what I do every day, what I had to do with grad school. And like my worst time in grad school was taking graduate level stats classes and not knowing anything. They were super overwhelming. So yeah, take a lot of those supportive classes that you might not know you need.
Really good advice. I know we're beyond time. I want to make sure that I get up the contact information because if you have additional questions or you just would really appreciate, connecting one-on-one to ask, get some more information, take a screenshot of this page. Our panelists are all open and willing to continue the conversation with you. You can reach out to them by email, and this is like a really safe way to get these answers. Get the answers that you have. Talk to other people who have this really valuable experience and learn from that. So, panelists, are there any other points that you wanted to make sure are made before we kind of close out for the night? Oh, I do see. What would you recommend if you haven't taken stats and you have no more time in your undergraduate career?
You'll be fine. I suffered through it, and you can learn anything that you put your mind to, I guess, to a point. And it's definitely a lot harder, especially if you're doing a project that involves a lot of stats. Some people's projects involve a lot of GIS and they don't do stats. Mine I did like a GIS thing just because I wanted to, and I wanted to use that skill, but I used tons of R. But it's not that big of a deal. There are lots of courses in college that you can take that can help you better prepare for those things. I would say none of the people in my cohort had ever used R before in their lives. So it's something you can learn.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay.
I'm using MATLAB and Python for the first time ever, and I've been consulting YouTube a lot. So that helps me for the coding. I don't know. It's because I'm more of a visual learner, but you'll find what works for you. I wouldn't be too intimidated by it. Every institution has their own minutia in the programs that they use, and you'll get used to it.
Yeah. I think Sarah's point to, there's online workshops for R as well. So there was another question, more for students who still have a couple of years at Northland. What what would you suggest them to do in terms of networking and making connections for future preparation of grad school? Questions are great. First of all, attend this stuff. Start networking with these connections here.
Yeah, do well in your classes. You know, make an effort to ask questions, build a relationship with your professors, because they're really a huge asset in just knowing where to apply, how to apply, writing letters. It's huge. Building relationships with other students and professors is the best thing that I got out of Northland.
And Michelle said it in the chat, but going to conferences is a really good way to network with people. And if you can, present a poster. Posters are, because of just the way they're set up, when people come and talk to you, although I guess maybe not at COVID times, all of the poster sessions are online, so it's a little bit more awkward. But by doing a poster, you can really interact with the people at the conferences and find people that have similar interests, or give a talk. Just try to engage more than the regular conference participant.
There are some really innovative things happening with some poster sessions that I was looking up, and who knows, like as this continues, the experiences that are, even though they're virtual, they're expanding because we're learning from them. So
yeah, I was actually just going to mention that this week is the GSA conference, the Geologic Society of America, is going on right now, and I attended a really amazing session this week for quaternary geology and geomorphology, where everyone was assigned to breakout rooms. You were given topics in the breakout rooms of like what to, you had to talk about your background and all that. And like I met some people in the program that I hadn't met before just through this GSA conference, and like started networking. It was awesome. And it's really cool. For a lot of these virtual conferences, they are waiving some of the fees. So it's hopefully going to be a little cheaper and easier to access, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll echo that. One of the conferences I always go to, the fee is like $600 or something, and they made the virtual fee $50, and we're waiving it for students. So conferences are becoming more accessible than ever virtual wise, and they're really learning how to put them on well and to do those breakout rooms that make them a lot easier to actually participate and talk to others.
where do you find those types of opportunities? Like, what are your go-tos? Apparently Twitter. What else?
So if you're really interested in a topic, try finding a listserv. So like I study algae, diatoms, and paleolimnology, and there are listservs for all of those things. And on all of those listservs, they're always doing the conference announcements. You can kind of just look up conferences, hear about them, and to research them. But honestly, these email lists are super helpful for all of that kind of information, and jobs and graduate student openings as well.
Okay. I'm hesitant to like cut it off because we have got so much good stuff that's happening right now. Please make sure that you screenshot this this slide so that you can connect with these panelists. I guess, Sarah, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody that, was part of this. Panelists, thank you for, being here and for offering, to go through your experience and give this advice. It is really imperative for our students, and it's just a wonderful opportunity. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And students, thank you for showing up. Thank you for, taking it seriously and getting the information, utilizing the resources that are here. So, Sarah, I'm going to kind of let you just jump in if there's anything else that you wanted to mention before we wrap up today.
No, I think we touched on so many things, and thank you to my fellow panelists. This was a lot of fun, and I'll just, invite you all to go talk with your faculty members. Set up those advising appointments, but also it's good to talk with multiple faculty members so that you get different perspectives. But hopefully this gives you a leg up in understanding the process.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. We did record, so it'll be up on the website soon. If somebody that you know probably would have benefited from it, we'll get the resource up on the careers section of the website soon. So thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Vanya.
Yeah, bye everybody. Feel free to email me. This is awesome. I really appreciate it.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you all for being my human contact for the week.